There we go. So, Newsha Ajami is someone, if you're familiar with water in the Bay Area, you should be familiar with Newsha. She is now, though, in a different role. She's the Chief Development Officer for Research in the Earth and Environmental Services area at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. So she's now on the other side of the bay. She's a leading expert in sustainable water resource management, smart cities, and water policies. So, in her role at LBL, she is focused on developing and leading interdisciplinary and impact focused research initiatives at the nexus of water, energy, and climate. Dr. Ajami is a mayoral appointee to the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission and serves on the National Academies Water Science and Technology Board. She's a non-resident senior fellow at the Brookings Institute and sits on several advisory boards and is a proud doctoral alum of UC Irvine. I will bring Newsha up. And that should just take a sec.
Okay, let's see. I'm gonna
We
share.
hear the voice. Okay.
Can you see me?
The
Okay,
person.
perfect.
All right. So, Newsha, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I mean, everyone I know is a little curious about your new role, but the I word is well represented, innovation. And as our draft title that we never changed was Innovating Our Way Out of This. So you can talk about innovation and defining this.
Sounds good. Actually, I think I'm going to spend a lot of time defining this. So I appreciate the title. Really happy to be here. Thanks for having me. Definitely a highlight of my day. Okay, so I'm going, let's see if I can move this forward. I'm going to talk about things that many of us already know. Obviously, the water sector is facing many modern challenges. As you all know, we're dealing with climate change, frequent droughts, dry spells, floods, wildfires, just name it. It's just truly wreaking havoc in our our daily lives. And we are dealing with a lot of urbanization in the coming years, people moving to cities. 68% of the population is expected to live in cities by 2050. We are dealing with aging infrastructure, and now we have money to invest in these old and leaky infrastructure. However, the question is, what are we going to invest in? And obviously, stricter environmental regulations are continuously affecting how much water is available to cities and communities, especially when it comes to the health of our ecosystem and how we can protect that, since we are part of this cycle together, and we have to protect the ecosystem if we want to have a healthy life ourselves. And on top of that is the issue of environmental justice and water access and affordability, and the fact that there are a million people in California, at least a million people in California, who do not have access to water, or they can't pay their water bills. So 20th century infrastructure that we had depended on for many, many years, almost a century, is a linear and a once-true system. We take the water out of the source, we clean it, we bring the same quality of water to every use that we have in our communities. Then the water is collected, put in the wastewater treatment plant, treated, and put back to the environment. Now, this system has worked, as I said, for many years, and it embodies a lot of major infrastructure that we all have come to know. You know, the dams, the pipes, the pumps, the wastewater treatment plants, and all the aqueducts that are exist. However, the problem with this system, as I said, is once true. So water comes through in one quality, used and discarded. It kind of creates this concept of water abundance, hydrologic stationarity. Will always, the system is built depending majorly on snowpack and making sure that we can use the snowpack as a natural storage and our dams and man-made infrastructure as a sort of to regulate when we want the water. And then ultimately, another thing that we are depending on is the fact that demand is going to grow steadily and perpetually, because as we assume population growth means demand growth. The system that we have has caused a sort of created this unrealistic sense of abundance for communities that we are serving. The perception of water for water systems for people is very different, but a lot of people do think there's just some form of magic happens and water comes to their homes, and they often don't even think about what happens afterwards. Yes, there are people like the group A. This was a study that was done in 2017 by a team at University of Illinois. And there are people who can actually in detail draw the water system from the top to the bottom. But there are people who actually very hardly can explain what is happening. And just having two young kids, I would say we do try to educate kids in a younger age about the water system and water use cycle, but obviously we don't do this continuously, and by the time they're out of school, maybe they forget what happened earlier in the years. So as we're trying to transition to the 21st century infrastructure model, we have to kind of think about a different kind of thinking, a fresh thinking and fresh approach to water cycle. The idea is we have to introduce alternative water supply solutions in order to create flexibility, additional resiliency, and reliability in the system. Think about reuse, recycling, conservation and efficiency, desalination of brackish water and different kind of water, stormwater and rainwater harvesting. All of this, many of us have already either are very much into implementing them or considering them as an option as part of a portfolio of solutions we are considering to enhance the reliability of water supplies, especially under the challenges we are facing, especially from climate change. The challenges, the problem here is not necessarily technological advancement. It's like, how do you incorporate these solutions into our existing centralized system? One way is to actually build more centralized system to emphasize the system we have. Another thing is maybe we can do this in a more distributed way, introduce solutions at different scales. However, while exciting to do something like that, it requires a different kind of thinking. It's like, it asks, what kind of a hybrid system are we going to have? And what does that mean when it comes to managing them and governing these systems? And if we have to rethink and reimagine governance of our water systems, what does that mean when it comes to data, and what kind of information do we need to make sure we can manage this new sort of evolving water cycle in an effective way? Which means that we have to think about what kind of data and information technology do we have? What kind of platforms do we need? What kind of new decision support tools do we need to bring in place? Do we need to revisit our regulatory and permitting process in order to enable implementation of some of these solutions? Now, the 21st century urban water infrastructure model is going to be more circular by nature. We are all talking about recycling. Many of us thinking, some cities, the ones that I live in, for example, San Francisco, have been trying to incorporate policies to enable on-site reuse systems in order to reduce the water footprint of new development and avoid building too many centralized systems, especially places that we cannot, either we don't have the land or the capacity to build. So it's happening at every scale, and other cities, also including some of the major cities, for example, San Francisco is also considering wastewater treatment, water reuse, and sort of reintroducing water back to the system in different ways. Some through the purple pipes, some through the potable water reuse, which means that treating wastewater to the highest quality and putting it back in our pipelines. And ultimately, all of this is going to create a circular model that needs to be managed differently. This also would ultimately reduce the amount of water we need to take out of the environment, and it would impact the amount of water or wastewater or treated wastewater that goes back to the environment. So there is a lot of consideration needs to happen in addition to figuring out how to incorporate this circular system to think about the amount of water we take out of the environment and what we put back to the environment. Oh, and so as we're thinking about the system, the question becomes, do we start from the baseline we have, or do we need to rethink the baseline? And that comes down to what the demand is today and where do we expect this demand to be in the next 20, 30, 40 years. Remember, we're building for the future, not today. So we have to kind of we have to have a way of predicting where the system is, how the system is evolving in order to build the right infrastructure model. Water demand actually have often assumed to be connected to population growth and economic growth. However, over the past 40 years, what we have seen is population growth have decoupled from water demand, and data in many ways can help us to kind of unfold this trend and better understand how this decoupling is happening. So the 20th century perspective on water demand is, climate impacts water demand, economic incentives impact water demand, how much we charge for water, demographic impacts demand, depending on if you are wealthy or poor, or depending on if you are from a different demographic background, from different social background, you may use water differently. And there is not much of an information gathering has been put in place to truly track this trend over time. However, when we look at the water demand and how it has evolved over the years, what we see is a disconnect between all those conventional assumptions we have had around demand. This graph is an example of that. You can see starting from the 1970s, the water demand has been sort of going steadily. However, the prediction or projection of demand has been anticipated a significant growth in water demand, which means that if this water utility in the 1970s going to believe where their water demand going to be in the next 10, 15 years, they should have built a lot of infrastructure in order to meet that demand. However, they have gradually realized that actually demand is not evolving, and now actually they feel their demand is steady or might be actually dropping over time. This was city of Seattle. Very similar stories across California, San Diego, Phoenix, Washington, D.C., also in the East Coast, Phoenix, in Arizona. And also, if you look at the water demand across the Bay Area, the same story can be told over and over. So water use is complex and dynamic. So even though there are known drivers, there are also unknown drivers of water demand that we have not thought about or incorporated. So sorry, this slide is not functioning as I was expecting it, but basically urbanization and more density is impacting people's water use. Non-residential irrigation is changing, which is almost 50% of the water we use. Water reuse and recycling is impacting water use, and human behavior. People are responding to different environmental stressors, including droughts, floods, and fires, and responding to them differently. They're becoming more conscious. They're paying attention to the impacts of the drought, and they are responding differently. And also the health issues, which none of us really expected, but created this shock in our water use patterns during the pandemic that none of us really know how we are going to get out of it or how it's going to ultimately impact our water use. There's also policy shifts and new codes and standards and technical advancements that has impacted water use as well over time. So if water demand is not growing or even declining, how else can we reduce our baseline, and what kind of demand are we building the future infrastructure for? So here I'm arguing that we have to think about reuse at every scale, regardless of we are in dense cities or suburban areas. We have to think about reuse at every scale and be able to do that in different ways. When we think about how we use water in our homes, overall, 50% or 60% of water is used outdoors. And in our homes, we are using high quality water to flush down toilets or water outdoor spaces. So there's so much opportunity here to reuse water in different ways. And those opportunities have been used by different communities to try to create a circular water economy. In San Francisco, as you know, we have the on-site reuse system and non-potable water program. You know, the bottom right shows the Microsoft campus that is a net zero water campus in Silicon Valley. And then you can see the Chase Center is trying to take all the water, rainwater, and use it to flush toilets. And the one on the right, on the top left, is showing a brewery we have in San Francisco that is now recycling a lot of its water for different purposes. So scale of water reuse is quite broader than what we originally thought, which is let's take the water all the way down to the wastewater treatment plant, treat it to the highest quality, bring it back up the hill, put it in the pipe and let people use it, or put it on the purple pipes and distribute it around the city. So it can happen in every scale. And we have to remember when it happens in the building scale or district scale, it's going to impact how much water these communities are going to extract from our water grid and how much wastewater they are going to generate. So we have to think about this more strategically and be ready for where this system is going and make sure we are not oversizing our large treatment plants for demand that might not exist in the next 20, 30 years. Just to wrap it up, the 21st century urban water infrastructure model is going to be hybrid and circular. We want it or not, this is going to happen. It's going to be using and reusing water multiple times in the same system. It's going to incorporate demand management, water reuse at different scales, stormwater and rainwater capture, conjunctive use, nature-based solutions. We are going to take a lot less water out of the conventional water sources we have, and we are going to put a lot less water back to the system. So we have to think about what we need to make sure we have to manage the system effectively. And I'm going back to this because ultimately the decisions that we are making to now is going to impact every one of these boxes, especially the one in the middle. If we end up building major infrastructure that where we do not have the base for the base customer line to pay for it, a lot of that weight falls on people who might not actually have the resources to pay for the major infrastructure we invested in or the capacity that's not being used. So we want to make sure we are not actually re-emphasizing the system we have and building a system that's going to be even more problematic when it comes to the facing 21st century challenges. So just to a few thoughts to leave you with, we have to remember, we have to think about where, when, and how much water we need. A smart grid that can track distributed production and consumption pattern is going to be key in this transition. We have to think about what is infrastructure, more than hard and physical infrastructure that we are all used to as engineers. We have to think about soft infrastructure, data, decision support tools, IT systems, smart meters, green infrastructure that is going to be popping up in different parts of our cities. What kind of performance measures do we need? Because a lot of these systems have benefits across the different disciplines or across different sectors. So we have to think about how we finance these systems, who puts the money in, where the money is coming from, and how do we measure performance of these systems collectively. And then at the end, we have to think about what kind of business model do we need in order to be able to manage the system in the long run. We need to have circular, data-driven, and customer-centric systems in order to make sure we are transitioning properly, and we have to revisit our rate setting process in order to help our utilities to evolve in a way they have to make sure they can meet the future's needs without necessarily falling under unhealthy financial conditions. And with that, I am done. Do you want me to stop sharing, Dennis?
Sure, yes. And oh, I had to hit my video. Well, thank you, Newsha. We couple questions popped up. One was about it, well, given the decoupling of population growth and water demand, uh, does that take into account bottled water supply, and how does the anticipated future of bottled water affect the outlook?
That's a great question. We actually did a study. We looked at bottled water sales, and there definitely was there was a peak on that when after the Flint, Michigan event that unfolded a couple of years ago. Couple of things I want people to remember: the bottled water, no matter how much bottled water you have, it's not going to be enough to make a dent in the amount of water people use. I was telling my son because of the Jackson, Mississippi situation, and he said, so why can't they just deliver bottled water to everybody's home? And I just gave him a simple example. I said, in San Francisco, we use 40 gallons per person per day. Imagine each one of us needs 40 of those jugs of milk that we have in our fridge. Now, if you want to serve a family of 4, that means 160 of those water jugs needs to deliver to everybody's home on a daily basis for them to survive. And San Francisco is a great example because 40 gallons per person per day is almost nothing. So now think about the broader Bay Area, think about broader California. That, just buying bottled water, I mean, I don't encourage people doing that. I think it's a bad idea, but overall, it doesn't really making a dent into the water use.
No, and I just another question came up. Just really getting back to your new role at Berkeley Lab, and just within the earth and environmental science area, what are there current or kind of future areas that you'll be involved in there?
Sure, a lot of different things. Actually, some of our we are still focusing on urban areas, smart cities, and smart transition. Also, I'm building a few initiatives around the energy transition and the environmental footprints of that energy transition. How much water do we need for this energy transition? How are we impacting land and the other environment on ecosystem as part of the transition? We are also focusing on carbon capture and sequestration. And again, people might not know, but we use a lot of water in that process. There's a lot of attraction to hydrogen, for example. Again, hydrogen uses a lot of water. I'm not only focusing on building more environmentally friendly, as a team, we are building more environmentally friendly solutions as part of our energy transition. I'm very, very much focused on bringing in the element of water to every discussion we are having, because I think often we forget. I'm trying to avoid unintended consequences as much as we can. None of us have seen the future, but obviously, if we can sort of use our today's knowledge to avoid some of these unintended consequences, it's going to be important. So I'm focusing on that.
Well, thank you. We did have, in honor of your move, we did do some work on this, but I think we'll have more photo shoots in future.
Yes, the problem of joining during the pandemic is there are not many photo shoots happening. So,
Yeah,
so hopefully by
true.
next Waterpalooza, I'll have a different picture. Not promising a yellow jacket though.
No, it was a good, certainly a good stuff. But
Yes.
we know well, the fashionistas in the world of water want to know what's next, and so we await that. So thanks for joining us and kicking us off. By the way, I did want to mention just today, I posted this in the chat. There was an article in The Guardian about The History
Yes.
of Lead in Chicago, which was
Yes.
a
Great
real
article.
historical eye opener,
Yes.
and but also it's a current thing because
Mhm.
Chicago seems incapable of doing anything about the lead pipes. They mentioned that Newark has been replacing the lead pipes at a fairly fast clip, and Chicago, like, but what they do in a day, Chicago has not been able to achieve in a year. So something's like
Yeah.
screwy there. But the
And
history
actually,
of lead promotion in the
yes.
plumbing industry is a real eye opener, as well. So
Yeah, if
anyway,
you look at the lead distribution, lead pipes distribution in Chicago, you see actually a lot of it still is in the low-income areas as well,
yeah.
which sort of re-emphasizing that environmental justice issue that already exists there.